right, I think we are live. And if you are watching this, Christy, maybe turn your volume down a bit because I hear myself on your end a bit.
Okay.
Better. All right, cool. Guys, can you tell us if we sound okay? For some reason, when I do this, the stream health on YouTube shows as orange, so I don't know if that's like bad or whatever. Yeah, but I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen it like that. It says that we sound hot. Okay, cool. Well then, hello everyone and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Today I am joined by a YouTuber, and one of the, well, at least from my experience, she was one of the early adopters of the whole anti-feminist sort of pro-men's issues, or at the very least non-feminist issues, YouTube community. Welcome to the stage, please, Christy0Misty.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Yep. All right, and thanks for coming on. Now, guys, let me know if Christy sounds okay, because on my end, my system is showing that she's coming out of 2 audio channels, and I don't know if it sounds okay. They said there's an echo. So I'm going to try to, let me see. I got to figure out why that is. I don't understand that. Cable, voice meter, auxiliary output. Maybe it's just this. Why? Okay. All right. And oh, let me do one more thing. One more thing here. Thank you for your patience. Let's see. We're gonna try this. I don't know if this is gonna work. All right, do you mind to say a few things?
Me?
Yeah.
Hello, Brian. How are you today?
I'm good. Let me know. Does this sound okay?
Yeah, this sounds good to me.
Okay, I want to see what the audience says. Okay, they said there we go. So I fixed it. All right, cool. All right, sorry about that. I don't know what that was, but it's gone.
Awesome.
All right, cool. So, Christy, I've seen your videos from a few years back. This was actually well before I got involved with Honey Badger Radio, and you made a series. It's like at least 7 parts, and it was all about feminism. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. It was like back in early, like the mid 2000s, late 2000s maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
2010. I think I started like summer, fall 2010, and then through 2011 or so. Yep.
All right.
That was almost a decade ago now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But
yeah, exactly. It has. So I guess the first thing I want to know, because I saw you started coming back just like, I don't know, a couple months ago and started making videos again. And the first thing that I should ask is the same thing that others have asked me to ask, which is, where have you been? What's going on?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to remember when exactly I left YouTube. I think technically it was 2011 or so. I had a bit of a stalker threat. Actually, we weren't sure who exactly it was, but it was somebody who knew where my family lived, and that's kind of what was the catalyst for shutting everything down.
Really?
Yeah. So it was. I mean, if it was all the time, you know how it is. If you're on YouTube and you're putting your opinions out there, you're going to get doxxed or the odd death threat or whatever, but this person let me know that they actually knew where my family lived. They described what our garage looked like, and I was not in any way comfortable with them having that information. And at the time I was going to school, this was a 2-year college, and this person contacted my school in order to get a hold of me. And at that point, the school's contingency team got involved, and they asked me to take down my channel ASAP.
Yeah.
So that was that was why I ended up leaving. And at that time, I think 2011, I had just gotten engaged. And so since then, I mean, I'm married now, and I'm about to have my 4th child. any day now, pretty much. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. Family life, and still really wanting to be involved in the anti-feminist realm. And I've been doing that in a smaller capacity, more casual capacity, obviously not on YouTube, but in real life, and then occasionally, you know, on social media. But yeah, my husband and I both felt like it was time for me to come back. He's a big fan of anti-feminism as well, and so yeah, we just decided it was time again.
Well, this information just, you know, it just brings more questions to the surface. So I got to ask you some other things. So okay, first of all, congratulations on your wedding and the 3 kids and the 4th. You said are you expecting, or are you basically talking about a 4th?
Yes, I'm expecting any day now, actually. I'm due pretty soon. So.
Wow. Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
4 kids. Whoa.
Yes.
My mother stopped at 3. I mean, it was probably my fault. I was the oldest, but I was like 10 pounds as a baby. And
oh, my goodness.
My brothers just slid right out. So anyway, so
your poor mom.
You should, if you ever met her, you'd say, "How is this possible?" She's tiny.
Oh, my
tiny
goodness.
Woman.
It's amazing how that works, though.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It all works out in the end.
Also, the other thing is this stalker. Whatever, did he just stop bothering you, or whatever came out of it?
I don't know. It was hard to figure out who this guy was or what he wanted. He had been sending book-length messages. I'm not exaggerating. Like, you could make booklets out of the emails and the messages he was sending, all under different names and aliases on social media. And so we had asked him several times to stop trying to contact me. He said he wanted me to get involved in some sort of international secret international team that he called the PASS team. I couldn't figure out what he was saying. It was very vague. And I think after I shut down my YouTube account and we had asked him multiple times to stop trying to contact me, he did. Either that, or I may have just ignored his last message. But yeah, since then, nothing. So
wow, you know, there's a missed opportunity there, Christy. You know, when you've gotten like long emails from the same person under different names, you could easily have just claimed they were all different people, and you get tons of harassment and make a lot of money. I mean, this is like victim bucks is a lot of bucks. I don't know if you know, because I know you've been on the internet lately, but you know, around like maybe 2014, like all the way up until now, it's become it's the newest in get rich quick schemes. You know, claim harassment, be female, and then open up a Kickstarter or Patreon and watch the dough flow in. You missed out. I'm sorry, you missed out. Should have hung around for that.
Shucks. I guess that doesn't surprise me, but wow.
Well, anyway, how do you know it was a man? And also, do you know what the motive was? Like, was it a feminist that was trying to harass you? Was it just somebody who fell in love, or you know, was he a Nigerian prince with millions of dollars? Like,
I don't know. It was really hard to figure out motive. He seemed to be of the anti-feminist or non-feminist persuasion. This wasn't a feminist. He said that he was a man anyway. He did lace some interesting stuff into his messages that made it clear that he had a crush on me, but that wasn't his primary goal in trying to contact me. It's really hard to describe and explain kind of the content of these messages, because they were so incredibly long, and yet you would read them and say, what did I just read? They were extremely vague, and we would ask for clarification on certain things, and it was really hard to decipher. Some people said that a lot of people who got involved in trying to figure this out said he sounded a lot like a sociopath. I don't know. He said that he didn't mean to didn't mean me any harm, but at the same
Right.
time saying, I know exactly where your family lives and you need to come work for me was kind of
creepy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was, I don't know. It was hard to know the motive. The main thing was this big organization that he kept talking about that he wanted me to get involved in. Largely anti-feminist, but it seems like it had other goals as well.
A patriarchy?
I have Yes. Yeah, basically no. He talked about infiltrating feminism in the, the higher up world, and
Right.
I don't know. It was intense. But
yeah. Wow. It's interesting. I was just thinking, I know that some of the most popular, many of, if not most of, the most popular voices in either the men's rights or anti-feminist sort of YouTube world or social media world are female voices. They're the ones that are the most, I think that they're easily the most popular. And they are the ones that surprise people the most. Because it's this idea that there is a woman that's championing a cause that she isn't doing for her so much for her own benefit, but rather because she sees it as a general, like on principle, an injustice, or at the very least, it's just a lie.
Sure.
And I think that what happens is with a lot of men, especially these kinds of fringe, disenfranchised men that probably don't get a lot of support, and they're not honored or they don't get a lot of compassion, is they see this and it's like a drop of water in the desert, and they suddenly become, I think for the most part, most of these people, mostly men, most of them are just happy that there's someone that's speaking up for them, and they're doubly happy that it's a woman, because they think, and I think rightly so, that people are more likely to pay attention to someone criticizing feminism if that someone is female. Because when they're male, they just dismiss them. You can see the amount of work that Paul Elam has done, for example, advocating for men's issues and criticizing feminism. And he is not the guy that gets onto, Tucker Carlson or Steven Crowder's show or whatever. It's they get Karen, and it's not that Karen isn't awesome, because I'm friends with Karen and I love her to death.
I'm a fangirl for sure.
Yeah, she's like my mean aunt. But it's like when a woman is doing it, though, there is something to it. It's like, wow, this is serious. Like, I think this suddenly becomes more valid. And then there are a few men that are just like, they were probably, just nobody cares about me. And then there's this woman that is speaking up for me and she cares about me. And I think they actually can become infatuated or obsessed, or some kind of dysfunctional kind of attraction forms. And I know it's true because I've seen it. And it's like, obviously I'm not trying to justify anything that you've had to go through, but I'm trying to work out where that could possibly come from, because I think if you were just a regular YouTuber that was talking about makeup or whatever regular female YouTubers talk about, this would not have happened, right?
Agreed. Absolutely. Yep. It's unfortunate that it's so incredibly rare, and that it is such a drop of fresh water to these guys, because what I'm saying is not, it shouldn't be rare or exceptional. It's not so crazy to be logical and point out where feminism has failed. It's unfortunate that there are so few people, I want to say women, but I guess people in general now, who can recognize feminism for what it is and the harm that it's done. Because to me, when I got on YouTube, I was saying common sense things, is what I thought, and I'm pretty sure, there's nothing incredibly intelligent about what I was saying. It wasn't special. It's just that right now we have such a vacuum, in our society of critical thought surrounding the feminist topic. So
for sure.
It's definitely a symptom of what's going on.
Yeah, it's you'd be surprised at how uncommon your common sense is.
Sure.
It's unfortunate too. Like,
Yeah.
I have okay, so you're back, and well, let me ask you this: what are your old videos still around? Like, I know that they're mirrored in places, but do you still have them up?
I do not actually. I just recently added them to a playlist on my channel, so they're, so a few people asked me to re-upload them. I don't actually have the videos, but I added some of the mirrored videos from other people's channels to a playlist on my current YouTube channel. But
okay, and just so the people, because we had a lot of new people watching this whole anti-feminist conversation has exploded since when you were talking about it. There's so many people talking about it now, and it's so big. I want to ask you another question, but before I do, I got some super chats. I should read them out. Also, guys, if you guys have super chats for Christy, any questions, put them in a super chat. I'll be sure to read them. So Hoki Bukisa gives us $1.99 and says, first, yes, people still do that. Maul Lurk gives us 20 kronas and says she's pretty, so feminists are bound to hate her.
Well, thank you.
I know, not bad for 4 kids. Do you have like you got to tell me about what your diet is and how you.
Oh, it's not that great right now, honestly. I try. I like to eat healthy. I love to eat healthy, but it's up and down. I do a lot of child chasing though, that maybe that keeps me fit. I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that will do it. And then we got $5 from Red Moonblade, and he says, remember to switch to live chat so the Allied Corporation does not filter what you get to see. Talking about Alphabet and all of the companies that they own. And then finally, the DCV Titan gives us $5 Canadian and says, common sense is so rare, it's basically a superpower.
Oh, that's a good quote.
Yeah,
that's
really.
True. Yeah.
So what made you decide to make videos in the first place? Why did you decide you wanted to talk about, specifically make these anti-feminist videos or these critical videos?
Let's see. I think that the first one I did, I'm pretty sure I posted it to Facebook. It was just like a Facebook video. And I don't even remember if the main topic was feminism or not, but I touched on that in the video. And a friend or two said, you should just put this on YouTube. It's a better video sharing platform than Facebook. And I think it actually had to do with the streaming process. Like, it would be easier for me to put it on YouTube than Facebook, or to make the video in the first place. So I thought, oh, okay. Here's me completely unfamiliar with YouTube. For the most part, I don't know how many videos I ever watched on YouTube. But so I started doing that, and it was kind of for the purpose of then sharing the link on my Facebook timeline. And I thought, only my friends would watch, and it would prompt good discussion. But, from there, it kind of took off on YouTube. And at the time, I was completely unaware of the men's rights movement, the existence of the men's rights movement, or any other anti-feminist YouTubers, commentators,
Sure.
or writers. And started to notice, because I think Karen Strawn at the time was starting. She had been writing, I think, for a while, but then she was making videos around that time. And so I'm based on the comments I got, I became familiar with the men's rights movement, A Voice for Men, things like that. But yeah, I kept making videos just because I felt like it was, it was a message that needed to be shared, needed to be talked about.
Yeah.
I was sick of seeing the bias in the media, the misandry in all of our institutions, just some of the experiences my dad had with the military, and in other arenas in younger years. Just things like that. I mean, I had the good fortune of being brought up by parents who were not steeped in feminist thought. And so they passed that on to me. And I don't know, it was just something I felt like needed to be discussed.
Were you getting a lot of hate, or was it mostly supportive?
Lots of hate, yes. Actually, it's funny because now there's a lot of support, or at least it's balanced out, you know. But at the time, I think YouTube was probably, I mean, it seemed like YouTube was run by feminists. It was, I
think it was. I mean, technically, it still is. I mean, in terms of who's in the boardroom and who's like deciding what goes where, I think it's still feminists. But yeah, the population of feminists has reduced for sure.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I came back. Yep, I used to get probably more hate than support before, and now if I get hate, it's usually from guys who claim to be MGTOW. I don't want to lump them, you know, into that because I realize that they don't represent MGTOW philosophy. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, you know, the message has kind of, or the feedback has changed.
Yeah, I think MGTOW kind of exists on a spectrum like gender.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, yes, there's a huge, definitely.
Yeah,
so many different, it's interesting. I got, you know, people saying completely different things, all labeling themselves MGTOW and then completely different ideas about what it is. And I guess that makes sense. Within any kind of philosophy, you're going to have a lot of diversity of thought, but yeah. Since you're like currently
building a small army of people in your household,
yes,
I'd like to ask, did you see, or were you ever looking into the areas that are sort of like male-dominated cultural interest areas like gaming, and how feminism has sort of invaded that, and the Gamergate hashtag that resulted from it? Are you aware of Gamergate and stuff? Because I know you weren't making videos at the time, so.
Yes, I'm aware of Gamergate, and I heard about it. I did not get into it very deeply, but I've since heard some discussion on it, and I mean, the general idea had me, you know, rolling my eyes, like, I can't believe this. But at the same time, I've come to realize one should not expect, you know, anything but craziness from feminists in every single arena. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it was one of those thoughts, like, really, we have nothing better to do. It's kind of like the manspreading, mansplaining, heap-eating, all those, you know, eye rape.
It's almost like the more comfortable our society gets, the more petty the complaints from feminists become. So
that's all there is left to complain about. There aren't any actual rights lacking.
No, it's just about like any cultures that sort of developed organically where men happen to occupy in a great majority. Feminists have a problem with it. They just don't like men having anything, you know. And it, oddly enough, and I know that I don't want to talk about this too much because I want to ask you some other stuff, but oddly enough, it's those men in those spaces, like gamers, for example, they are some of probably the most welcoming to people outside, especially women. Like they can be the biggest white knights too, and it's crazy because it's like they want to be punished for living as a man while trying to let women in, and they find every possible reason to validate or justify the complaints that these you know harpies have when they jump in, and the only thing they want to do when they come into the hobby is change everything. They don't actually like it as it is, and I just think it's a control thing, and I'm talking about feminists here. It's not about it's just about control. That's what it's about. So.
Absolutely agree. It's either destroying or invading male spaces, I think, is just one of the hallmarks of feminism.
Yes.
There's no
absolutely
can't even leave it alone. That's
Yeah. So
lots I can say on that, but go ahead.
Okay, so here's a maybe this is a tough question, maybe not, but I think it's kind of an interesting one to ask, because I've asked this of Karen too. So you found all your videos and you put them to a playlist. Did you watch any of them? And when you do, does it make you cringe at all when you watch your old stuff?
Yes. Yes and yes. To be honest, yeah. It's interesting because looking back, I mean, I still agree with myself for the most part, but there were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that I would word very differently. I
What's an example?
Oh, let's see. Trying
I
to think of
can.
something off the top of
Okay,
my head, but
okay, let me break it down a little bit. Okay, so have any of your views evolved since you made the videos on feminism itself? Like, I don't like if you're still just as much against it, or if you have like a more nuanced view of it, or.
I'm just as much against it. I think in some ways more so
Mm-hmm.
than before, but well, I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah.
I think I've always been quite anti-feminism or anti-feminist, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I know. For example, I had mentioned that I'd lived in the Middle East for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking about how the point I was trying to make was at
Well, what was the original argument? I think it was something about how in the Middle East, it's a pretty like the men are very masculine there or something like that. I thought I
well,
could be
I
wrong.
think
Don't I'm not trying to misquote you. So
no, that's
th-
totally
I'm,
fine.
I'm not
No,
having a Kathy Newman moment here.
no, and excellent. I certainly would not expect you to remember that either. No, I think I was pointing out that the difference between Middle Eastern culture and Western culture, and how at least they still recognize a difference between the sexes. And I was saying that that is refreshing, that they don't have this this ridiculous illusion that we as men and women are basically the same.
Right.
There's just a basic understanding, a baseline understanding there that we are different. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, from that, nothing good really happens. I have so many problems with the way that Islam, treats women and with Middle
And
Eastern
men.
culture. But yeah, and my point was not. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of people took that to mean that I was either pro-Islam or that I thought Middle Eastern culture was
Better
like
than
the
Western
ideal
culture.
or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was not the point. My point was at least they have this basic thing right, and it's sad that I had to go to a Middle Eastern country to experience this rather refreshing view of the sexes,
Mm-hmm.
that we've completely abandoned here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, so I think, yeah, we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, as it were.
Yeah.
In avoiding chauvinism, we've completely gone off a cliff. So yeah, that's an example. And there were other things where I thought, oh my goodness, that was not very articulate, or wow, that was a blanket statement, and no wonder
Yeah.
people went crazy. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah. What about
it's one of those things.
yeah, sure. No, I got it. Hoki Bakisa gave us $4.99 and he says, so what you're saying is you have more strategic oil reserves than Allison. And Fretchinator2 gives us $5 and says men have all the responsibilities and women get little rights. That's with regards to Saudi Arabia. It's what it is it's gynocentrism taken through authoritarianism to its logical extreme. So women are given all the security, which is something they ask for, and men are given all the responsibility, which is something they also ask for, or at least they are honored for doing, which is why they do it. And that's, in a way, that's, one could say that's the opposite, but I don't think it is, because feminism is a lot more like that than feminists would like to admit, because they don't really want liberation. They want men to take all the responsibilities, but they also want women to have all the rights and freedoms. And they want them to have security. And you can't do both of those things. So
Agreed. Which I think is one of the main reasons why feminism doesn't really oppose Islam. I mean, that's one of the things you would think, right? This classic, like, why would feminists not be fighting for women in the Middle East? Well, I think there are a few reasons, but that certainly could be one of them.
For sure. There was actually a feminist Muslim, I believe she was in Australia, and she was on a talk, sort of like a talk show, with a panel, and she was making the case that Islam is the most feminist religion.
Interesting.
And there were a lot of, people that were like, there's no way, those things are polar opposites. But when you think about it, I think she's right in a lot of ways. I think that because it does make men into the ultimate agents, which feminism as an ideology does. It gives men all the agency. It says that they have all the power. It just complains about it. It also says that women have no power, whereas Islam actually, they remove all of female accountability, or as much as they can, but they also remove a lot of their freedom. But on top of that, the women in those cultures are not only okay with it, and I'm talking about in general, as Jesse Lee Peterson would say, not all, but most. They're not just okay with it, but they actually promote it within the culture itself. So they think this is the way that we should live. And that is essentially by, their holy book. But it does come from an authoritarian place, which is their church. So I think that there is a case to be made that she is right when she says that, or at least more correct than wrong. I just think that if you ask your sort of common coffee house feminist that doesn't actually pay a lot of attention to, what the arguments are, she would probably disagree, and she'd say it's just about equality, though, and you're just like, well, no, it's more than that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. No, I definitely think it's a statement that demands explanation. If you're going to say, well, Islam is a lot like feminism, then you have to explain what you mean by that. But no, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's interesting.
What about your views on feminism's own history? Did your views on that change at all, or is it the same?
I think it's the same, although I think I've definitely delved into history a lot more since I was originally making videos. History is something I love in the first place, but since getting into feminist history, that's been very fascinating for me. I think one area where it has changed a little bit is from the minute I started researching women's suffrage. I think my views changed a bit on that, and I'm not in a place where I'm completely dead set on a certain opinion on it, but my starting point was already less feminist than popular opinion. So I understood, even growing up, that prior to women having the vote, it wasn't because of sexism against women. It was not that black and white.
Right.
It wasn't really a gender issue. I already knew that. I understood the concept of it was essentially one vote per family, the head of the home voting on behalf of the family, and the reasons for that, and the fact that being a voting citizen also carried with it certain responsibilities that women at the time didn't want to have. So, I understood that at least, but since getting into it, my views on that have probably just I'm not at the point where I'm out there saying repeal the 19th, but at the same time, I think that I'll put it this way, I think there is a strong case to be made for the fact that women's suffrage was kind of a mistake. And of course, if I say that, anybody says that, they get burned at the stake, because it sounds like a very
backwards.
It sounds very misogynistic.
Sounds sexist, yeah.
But you have to discuss why that is, and look at the facts, look at the statistics, look at our legislation surrounding that whole topic. So, yeah. That's probably one thing.
I feel that feel. I think it's hard to talk about. I think personally, when it comes to the vote, the cat's out of the bag, right? I don't think we can put that back in the bottle. So I think what we need to do is, if we're going to have the discussion about that, I think we need to talk about either adding responsibilities to go with rights, which is usually the flip side of rights, and try to balance those out in some way, there has to be like more done. We can't, obviously, there's no going back, and I don't know that that would be the best way. Some people are saying that, of course, we can, but I don't know. Speaking of the history, have you heard of a book by a guy named Bob Lewis? I had him on here once. We did a Fireside Chat. He wrote a book called The Feminist Lie. It was never about equality.
A couple of people have been recommending that to me and saying I would really love it. So
yeah, it's I have that book. It's actually really good. It goes into the history of feminism and how it was never about equality, and it'll, you know, it will definitely raise some questions, some things to think about. But it's such a hard thing to talk about with regular people. It's almost like the more you learn, it can be really depressing, because you're like, well, I want to talk about this, but people are going to freak out, you know?
Can we have a discussion without letting it get vitriolic and emotional?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think when it comes to the vote, especially, it's like, well, I think what we have to determine is voting a right or is it a privilege? Because if it's a human right, then males should be able to vote without signing up for selective service. If it's a privilege only afforded on certain conditions, such as selective service, which only males are required to sign up for, then men should not be held to certain conditions that women are not. So, I mean, I think probably the best thing to do would be to get rid of selective service, the draft, but I don't know. It's just this whole can of worms about, about, you know, if women have the vote, then they vote for themselves certain policies, and, you know.
And it doesn't come with responsibilities, and there's a lot of a lot there to unpack.
So much, yeah.
I got some more super chats. Thank you guys for being so gracious with your donations. I want to go ahead and read them out. Frenchinator2 gives us $5 and says, Brian, you are an angry Puerto Rican straight man. Dyson. Hee.
What?
But you're a mean Puerto Rican man. Monk, let's talk about everything except the topic at hand. He's referencing the Monk debates. I don't know if you saw them.
I did not, no.
Oh, do you know about them?
I've heard the term, but I haven't looked into it at all.
Oh, okay. Well, I will give you the quick rundown so that you're not completely lost. So there's this guy that's he's become extremely popular overnight. His name is Professor Jordan B. Peterson.
Oh yes,
have you heard of him?
Totally familiar with him. Yes.
All right. So Peterson has been making the rounds. He goes on all kinds of places, and basically wherever he goes, people try to attack his character. I mean, almost anywhere he goes, unless he gets on to like H3H3 or something where they just want to actually have a conversation. If he goes anywhere mainstream media, they try to destroy him, you know, in some way, which is really revealing about the MSM, by the way.
Yes.
But there was a debate that was held at a place called Monk, where they do debates on various topics, and they were debating political correctness, and on the team arguing for political correctness as progress was a black activist man named Michael Eric Dyson, and a journalist for the New York Times, and a feminist named Michelle Goldberg, I believe. And then arguing against political correctness was Jordan B. Peterson and Stephen Fry, the actor. And basically the whole debate was Michelle Goldberg attacking Peterson by accusing him of misogyny and sexism, and Michael Eric Dyson attacking Peterson, accusing him of racism. And neither of them talking about the actual topic of political correctness. So this guy was just making a reference, a joke to that. So anyway, without dragging this out, you should probably watch it, but have something nearby, like a heavy bag or maybe, you know, something that you can punch, because you will get mad.
I find I watch a lot of his stuff, and I find it hard. I mean, lately, some of his interviews, like you say, with the mainstream media, I mean, even before the Kathy Newman debate, but, you know, ever since then, or not debate, it turned into who knows what the word is, but supposed interview. You know, ever since then, obviously he's been even more high profile in the media. But I mean, I knew about him before he was super famous. But yeah, I've been watching a lot of his interviews with mainstream channels, and oh my goodness, it's hard to stomach. It's pearls before swine in a lot of cases, and I don't know how he keeps his cool, but he does a good job of it.
Yeah, it's
painful to watch.
Yeah, for sure. It's actually pretty inspiring. It makes me want to, because he's effectively tanking like the entire culture war right now. Because he's the one person they bring on. It's not even because I think that, you know, there aren't other people that have a lot to add or anything like that. I know that there are, but he's the main one that they're going after, you know, because he's like, it's so popular, and it's all about I think for the mainstream media and the activist types that are trying to take him down, it's like trying to bring down an idol, like some to them it's like a symbol of the entire argument. So if they can like discredit Peterson, they can win, but it's just not that simple. And Peterson stays cool, and I have to give him credit for that.
Yes. Yeah. He's a great combination, you know, of compassion and intellect and all of that. I mean, he definitely, obviously, he does well in interviews, but it's definitely painful every time to sit through.
Absolutely. So we got one more super chat. Zaranx gives us $5 and says, "You shocked the normies with Esther Viller." Whew. That's spicy. Before you move on to the feminist lie, you know about Esther Viller's book, The Manipulated Man? I
know about it, but I haven't read it.
You can listen to the whole thing on YouTube.
But, oh, really?
Yeah, awesome. You can listen to the entire book on YouTube. It's rough. I mean, I like the book, but it is that will upset people.
I believe it.
Yeah.
From what I've heard. Sounds like a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what about your views on MGTOW? Have they changed since you made your video?
No, I don't think they have. I think, well, yeah, my views on MGTOW itself have not changed. I have always been of the opinion that it's unfortunate that MGTOW exists, but I see it as a rational and a logical response to the world in which we live. I think the only way my opinion has really changed would just be I've noticed it taking on more I've noticed more men taking on the label of MGTOW who may not really be MGTOW. You know, they're not really going their own way. They're, you know, harassing women, including anti-feminist women, and they would fit better under the original TFL label or acronym
True
from, you know, back in the day.
Loneliness, right? Yeah, True Force Loneliness.
Back in 2010 anyway, that's what they were saying, and I don't know if it kind of, you know, MGTOW evolved from that at all, but it was definitely a different, you know, basically I think TFL was essentially what they're calling incels now, right?
Yeah, incels of now are the TFLs of before. I think the main difference between the two is one would hope, because again, when I said MGTOW is kind of on a spectrum, I'm not making a joke. I actually think that they are. I think there are some that have like gone. Yeah. They're just full on MGTOW, and they don't even make videos on YouTube. They don't interact on social media. They just live out their lives as MGTOW. And then there are those that claim that they're MGTOW, but they're still either they're adopting it early, or they're just really angry about the fact that they are, because they would rather this isn't the life they chose. So it's the difference between your level of satisfaction with your choices. When it comes to incels, I think that the main difference is that incels they're still very much desiring, you know, female affection. They want love. They want a relationship, and they're not able to let it go. They're not, or at the very least, you know, sort of accept the possibility that they might not find anyone, because the fact is a good chunk of men that will be genetic dead ends. They were not going to find anybody. That's not because of you know, there's something wrong with them or whatever. I just think that's history. You know, there are we get to genetic bottlenecks, and there are just men that just won't reproduce. And if they can live with that, and be satisfied with their life as it is, I think they'd be happier. But I think that incels are people that are very unhappy because they're very lonely.
Yeah.
And I think that actual MGTOWs are fine. They're doing okay.
Agreed. I think, but then I wonder how many. I think some incels are essentially calling themselves MGTOW because of the fact that, you know, they can't get a woman, and they're very angry and bitter about that fact, and they kind of give MGTOW a bad name. You know, in other words, a lot of what people associate with MGTOW isn't necessarily MGTOW behavior at all, because MGTOW philosophy is literally men going their own way, not harassing people or posting homicidal comments about women in my comment section on my videos. So I realize that's a misrepresentation. But yeah, it's such a mixed bag. I realize, you know, like we've talked about, there's always going to be diversity of thought within any philosophy, any organization. Yeah. But it definitely MGTOW has grown so much since I was originally on YouTube. I did a recent video on MGTOW just with some thoughts, and I have a very small channel right now. I didn't even have 3,000 subscribers, and wasn't getting a whole lot of views. I made that video, and, you know, 50,000 views later, you know, a week later, it was all these MGTOW comments for the most part, almost entirely MGTOW. Ranging from "this is spot on" to "go die, this is horrible, you're, you know, deceitful," bleepity bleep, but almost entirely from MGTOW. And so it's just, to me, it's just kind of an illustration of the fact that the movement has grown so much, and it's just another symptom of the fact that there's a very real problem in society the men are reacting to. This is unprecedented. And that's, unfortunately, a lot of people just criticize MGTOW without asking the question, well, why does it exist in the first place? Why aren't we asking that question? For sure. You know, it's not an ideology. I mean, these guys are kind of out of necessity going their own way in most cases. So, yeah, I think my views on it are pretty much the same, but. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but like to your point, it has grown a lot. Okay, and then lastly, if you look back on your beliefs, then have any of your views on equality itself as an idea, have any of those evolved? Or what were your ideas on equality? Now, this gets into, we were talking about the vote, and I think it's really interesting that you brought that up. And I'm glad that you recognized what the actual history of the vote is, because that's one of the most misunderstood ideas, even amongst normies that are not feminists at all. It's definitely one of the biggest, most misunderstood things. So I was just curious about what to quote Jordan B. Peterson, it depends on what your definition of equality is.
That was excellent. Exactly. I mean, this is the big question, isn't it, though? You know? I don't know. I think it's hard to define equality because I think equality of opportunity is the closest, in my mind, is the closest we can get to giving equality a proper definition. Equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, of course. But even then, there's still, that opens another can of worms in multiple areas. There are some things that I don't think we should have equality, quote, equality, on. So, for example, the women in combat issue. I don't think that women should be in combat, and it's not about women being in any way having more valuable lives than men, but it's about combat effectiveness. I've read enough from seasoned military officers who have written on this topic, and they essentially, there's this one book called The Warrior Elite by Dick Couch, who's a former Navy SEAL and, you know, trained Navy SEALs, and he says he gets asked all the time if if he thinks women can hack it or
Mhm.
could or should be allowed into the SEALs or to try out, you know. And at the end of the day, his conclusion is, of course, there are a few who potentially could. They're going to be extremely rare. But he said at the end of the day, the question is it combat, is it gender equality or combat effectiveness? Which God do we serve? That was kind of how he ended his spiel on it. Because at the end of the day, we are very different. And there have been enough studies, I think, to show that, you know, women do well, very well in support roles in the military. I'm totally pro women in the military. I was planning to go into the Marine Corps myself way back when. I went with the Air Force Auxiliary instead. It was just search and rescue. But the military is full of double standards that should not exist. You know, if it requires, if you're required to do a certain level of fitness to do a certain job, you know, if that's what the job requires, then whether you're male or female, it shouldn't matter. You need to meet that standard. But anyway, so that's, you know, women in combat, for example, is just one area where I would say I don't really think we should have equality there, because I think it's about more than just, well, can a woman meet the standard? But I will say, requiring women to meet the same standards as men would be a great place to start, because at this point we don't even have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Point, you know, women are held to a much lower standard. So
it's weird that you would, like, you know, the military example is a really good one, because, and this is actually not just true of that. Like, I'm reminded of my wife who, when she was younger, she was training to be like involved with jobs that are dominated by men, like, you know, firefighters and that kind of thing. And, you know, when you're doing this stuff, like, lives are on the line, you know, not just the people that you're rescuing, but the people that you work with on your team. And when you're in the military, it's the same idea. You're not just an individual that's good at what you do. You're also part of a larger unit, and anything that could possibly compromise that, it's just not worth the risk, right? It's you have to be part of a well-oiled machine when you're in the military. And I've had some military guests on to talk about them with this. Once you're in the military, okay, you are effectively not an individual. You're a property of the government, and you're part of a larger unit. Now, whether you like that or not, if you want to be effective, you have to. And so I think that like somebody said in the comment section that if women can meet the standards, and they're not changed just for them, but they're basically universal standards across the board, he thinks that they should be okay to serve as long as they're in units with other women. So, you know, maybe like co-eding the making the units co-ed, you know, where the men and women can coexist, even if you made the standards the same, that could create its own other tensions, right? Like, you know, you can create other issues, even if they're both, you know, again, the standards are the same in terms of the what we're asking for them and all that. So I think that, you know, this isn't a simple question to answer. It's not. Right. But to your point, if we had a universal standard that you needed, like minimum requirements, and they were the same as the male requirements, and if there's some exceptional woman that can meet all those, then, you know, good for you, right? I was just checking. Did you know that only one woman, I think there's only one or two women that have ever tried to become Navy SEALs? Yes. And that they both dropped out?
Yes. Yep. Because, I mean, to become a Navy SEAL, I mean, even men, these are the best of the Navy's best, who then try out to be the best, and most of them fail.
Yes.
So this is, I mean, we're talking guys who already are at the top of their game. I mean, it's kind of like mixing up, if you were to mix up the men and the women in the Olympics. I mean, like, you may have some incredible, exceptional women, but they're still not going to do well against a man in the exact same field at the top of his game, you know? Particularly when it comes to the physical, which is a large part, obviously, of what, you know, BUDS and the whole program leading to the Navy SEALs. So
absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, it's just, you know, that's just the reality of it. So yeah, no, the equality conversation is a difficult one.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely got a lot of nuance. So with relationship to, I think I might have some more super chats. Hold on, let me look. Oh yeah, I do. Wow, I got a few. Okay. Fretchinator2 gives us $5 and says, if I went on some of the incel boards, I would probably start thinking, quote, maybe the problem is you, not the women around you, end quote. I would echo that. I think that most of the time it is a problem with the incel. Now, I'm not blaming them for I understand that it can be very depressing to be alone, especially if the hardest part is the longer you are alone, the more difficult it is for you to stop being alone, if that makes sense. Like it's actually a self-fulfilling cycle. Like the longer you go without, human interaction, the harder it is to start human interaction because you're out of practice. Because when you finally do get it, the amount of time that you spent alone actually increases your desperation for human contact, which you might push people away. So it's actually, kind of. Unfortunately, it is, as Peterson said, to those who have all, more is given, and to those who have little, everything will be taken away. The harder it is to climb, the further down you fall. So Zeranx, Zeranx. Well, did you want to? I don't want to take if you wanted to comment on that.
No, you were spot on. I think, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
I would agree.
Zeranx gives us $5 and says, are you familiar with the article from Australia about teens going their own way? TikTok. No, I'm not. Actually, you're right. I think I heard something about it, like an article, like a headline, but I didn't read it. Did you?
Yeah, I was going to say someone just posted that in a group that I was in, but I did not read it either. That's interesting. So do you think MGTOW is getting starting younger and younger? Because I've heard from a lot of young men who have had no negative experiences, but they're kind of being mentored by MGTOW men and being brought into the fold, as it were, and kind of being exhorted to not to take any risks. I mean, at the ages of 18 and so on.
Well. I'm trying to see if there's anything. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the article. It looks like it's teenage boys that are going their own way. So, it looks like they are starting younger. That's pretty interesting. That's kind of a big deal. I might have to talk about that on another show. Yeah. But I'll have to look into it more. RamBam3000 gives us £5 and says, planning on asking my university workplace to host Karen. Wish me luck. Well, cool. Sweet. Yeah, I hope you get it. I hope the university allows it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure she's not popular on university campuses.
No, I don't think so.
Can't imagine why not.
I don't know. That really boils the beans. I don't know. Baffling. J O'Ballas gives us $5 and says, low status MGTOW comes by way of incel. You can't fire me, I quit. High status MGTOW is his own thing. See, I know that there's a hierarchy within MGTOW, or sort of an order, I guess. Fretchinator2 gives us $5 and says, same thing with the alt-right. What are they responding to? I'm not sure what the... I'm not sure about the context of that statement, Fretchinator2. I apologize. And then lastly, Joey Jojo gives us $2 and says, anti-feminist MRA women are the best women. Well, yeah, of course.
Aw. Naturally. I don't know.
Anti-feminist men are also the best men. Yes. Please don't leave me out.
Absolutely.
I want to see if the other guy clarifies that statement.
About the alt-right?
Yeah. Red Moonblade gives us $5 and says, MGTOW is basic, embrace chaos. Thanks, Red Moonblade. All right.
What was it? I didn't catch that.
He says, MGTOW is basic, embrace chaos.
Embrace chaos.
What we need is an antidote to chaos. That's what you need. All right, so...
Yes.
Have you? I know that you. I noticed that you do a lot of book quoting. That you in your older videos, because I watched. I kind of watched a bunch of them this morning to prepare for
Oh,
this.
funny.
Yeah. So, have you read any other good books since, like in that downtime that you were away?
Yeah, I think I read some of the, the classics of anti-feminism. Christina Hoff Sommers, Who Stole Feminism, The War on Boys. Lots of Christina Hoff Sommers stuff.
Did you think that Christina Hoff Sommers?
Yeah.
You read her book, so I actually have this question. I've been wanting to get her on, and I've messaged her in the past, but I think that she's either too busy or not interested. Maybe we're too much for her. Maybe we're too extreme. And yeah, because I mean, she calls herself the factual feminist. She still considers herself a feminist. So I guess what I'm wondering about is, in her books, how much does she defend feminism, or is it just focused on the issues facing boys? Like, what can you determine about her, sort of where she stands on, I guess, her loyalty to feminism and how it relates to men's issues? Can you get an idea, or from when you read it, or did you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think she didn't delve into that too much from what I remember. I think the most recent of her books that I read was The War on Boys, and she focused more on that rather than on feminism. But I think in Who Stole Feminism, she went into that a bit more. And the idea is, I think she calls herself a classical feminist, right? And so her thought is that, that feminism is needed in other countries around the globe, but not really in the West anymore. In other words, she would agree that there are definitely no rights that women do not have here, and that we don't need it. Her stance, I think, is that she would see it as necessary, in other countries. And I mean, I would disagree. I don't think that you need feminism to fight for equality, but that's another topic.
No, I agree with you 100%. I say it all the time. One of the things that I run into when I debate with feminists or people who say they accept the kind of, feel good, mushy, huggy, cuddly version of feminism that loves everybody the same and, just wants equality and, it's good for men too and all that. I try to help them understand that what they're supporting does not agree ultimately with what their belief system might be, and that it's not necessary for them to call themselves feminists to care about equality. It's just not. You don't have to call yourself that. And for some reason, people cannot let go of the label. They can't. So
I know it's and I'm sure it's rooted. I mean, amen and amen. You basically said it all. I think if feminism were actually about equality, then one could see how it would be useful in another country. But it never was about equality. If you really look into its history and its roots, it is an ideology. It does have a much bigger goal. Actually, I don't even want to say bigger, because its goal was never really equality. Unfortunately, it was peddled as that in order to appeal to the masses. I don't know if, I talked about cultural Marxism a little bit in my original series, but I didn't ever get into what that meant, really, I don't think. I just kind of threw out the term a lot, but that's my perspective on feminism is from that lens. A lot of the confusion surrounding feminism and its really baffling behavior makes sense when it's seen as, something that essentially cultural Marxists were using as part of their plan. So it really wasn't about equality. It's about a whole bunch of other things, including destroying the family, including kind of subjugating men, getting women in power positions, not just about equality of opportunity. But it did appeal to a lot of women who really believed it was about equality. They had certain grievances against men, had experienced actual genuine chauvinism, and so they were, prime candidates for the cause. And here we are. The myth has not died because the mainstream media has perpetuated it all these years,
Oh, you know, I dig this because you and I we agree on a lot of stuff that's pretty. I wouldn't consider to be controversial, but a lot of people would. So let me ask you this question. Oh God, did I just lose it? I hate it when that happens.
I did ramble on for a long time.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna read the super chats. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Okay.
Frenchinator2 says $2. It gives us $2 and says classical feminists are the worst kind of feminist. And then Zeranx gives us $5 and says real feminism has never been tried. That's pretty good. And then in reference to the earlier message, the alt-right thing, when he said same thing with the alt-right, what he's saying is he's thinking of the fear around the alt-right and how people are discouraged from looking into their issues. So basically, I guess what he's saying is that if we knew more about it, we shouldn't be afraid to. I personally, you know, that's not related to what we talk about at HBR, but as a free speech advocate, I would be fine with having a discussion with people on the alt-right because I'd like to, you know, definitely get an idea of what they want. But I've seen a lot of their streams, so I do know what they're about. But again, it doesn't have a lot to do with what I care about, because I think ultimately, if we don't fix the problems facing men and women culturally in this country or in the West in general, none of that's going to matter, because we're just like, seriously, I think that underpins all of our social problems is the way that men and women relate, because it affects our ability to make whole families, raise our children properly, to then that they become fully realized adults that are less dependent on the system, i.e. the government. They're also able to, they have their we won't have the kind of culture that we have now, you know, with all of this division and strife, because people won't need to, let's say, find things to identify with. Have you ever noticed that when you watch feminists debate on mainstream media, or when they're making their own content and they're talking about the stuff they care about, they almost always try to draw their arguments from popular culture in order to make the case as to why feminism is needed, as though popular culture raises children and shapes society. You know what I'm saying? As
though popular culture speaks for us in any capacity or represents the majority.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, I see it, and they always, it's like, I mean, I see it all the time, you know, that this is why Anita Sarkeesian is still relevant, despite the fact that we were trying to ignore her. This is the reason why people like Lori Penny or any number of other, you know, like websites like Mike.com and Now This and Al Jazeera and so on, they constantly make references to things like, you know, Harry Potter and Disney movies and other forms of media, TV shows and comics. And these things, look, I love this stuff, but it's not that important. It's not, those things should not be raising your children. They should not be telling you what right and wrong are. They should not be shaping our culture. They are supposed to be, I think, the arts are a product of culture. They are not made to create culture. And I think that feminists, because they see everything in the lens of power, but the one thing they hate the most seems to be fathers, then they try their best to exclude them, and they make all of the sort of, you know, everything that comes from culture is where we get our role models, is how they see it. They see it as like, oh, who's going to be our role model if we have a Disney princess that's just waiting for a guy to kiss her? Who's going to be our role model if, you know, there aren't any women in this movie that are significant? Like if we don't have Rey, or if we don't have, you know, I don't know, some Wonder Woman or whatever. And it's like, these things aren't important. Like you're putting a lot of focus on this stuff, and maybe Hollywood appreciates it because they get to make money, but at the end of the day, those things should not be raising your kids. You should be raising your kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just entertainment, or it's supposed to be just entertainment.
Yeah.
But it has definitely become such an influence and gotten such a hold on us as a culture. I mean, in a lot of ways, we live for entertainment now. You know, it's, I mean, such a booming industry. It's like, it's massive, bigger than ever before. And you're right. I mean, that shouldn't be raising our children. This shouldn't be determining our values as a society. Like you say, it should be a byproduct or a product. The arts should be a product of culture and not vice versa. But because we consume it in such massive quantities, I guess it makes sense that it's, you know, its influence has grown so much.
Yeah, I think that we do consume it in mass quantities, and I think part of the reason for it is because we don't have that family, you know, like because we don't have those. Yeah. Like, okay, I was lucky enough to grow up with my father and my mother in my life, and I hate that it's crazy that I even have to say I was lucky for it, but but statistically speaking, I am, you know, statistically speaking, and I had them. So as a result, if I was spending leisure time, I was most of the time spending it with my family. We would go and do things together. You know, I remember vividly us playing, we would interact with media, but as a family. So it was actually about that first. Like, we'd all sit around the TV and watch James Bond movies when they would come on like a Sunday. We would play board games together. We would go out of the house. You know, we would even, I was around for when video games at the home were brand new. You know, my mother got us an Atari 2600 and we sat in front of the TV and we played it together. And then when we didn't, we all went, you know, and did other things together, or we went our separate ways to do stuff. And today I have a nephew, and his father, my brother, is not around, and his mother, she is the worst human being I've ever met. I don't know why my brother had a kid with her. She is a terrible human being, but they're not married. My nephew's mother is very abusive, and I don't see him very often. Like, you know, he's kind of like, he spends a lot of time with my mother. So he's essentially being raised by his grandmother. Wow. And he distracts himself by playing video games constantly. Okay. And I was just talking to my mother the other day, and she was like, saying, I don't know what's wrong with him. And my mother thinks the games are doing this. You know, she's like, oh, it's the games that get in your head and they control you, and he's turning into a robot. And I'm like, no, Mom, no, he's acting that way because his father and his mother don't want anything to do with him. And I can see why this is so painful for him. And I think this is actually closer to the norm for a lot of children today, this generation. It's a shame, but that's what I think there is. You can look at that shift. And I think that when you take away a father from their children, or you break up the family and you just have a system that raises children for them with daycare centers and schools and government programs that are meant to essentially fill in the gap that the father leaves because he's not around, then you will get dysfunctional children that are constantly looking for something they didn't know they needed and they never really had, and it will change them, fundamentally changes them. You know, and I think that you can lay that at the feet of feminism easily. You know, absolutely.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, one of the goals being to break up the family. I mean, that was not even a secret. If you go back and, you know, read their manifestos and listen to some of the early feminist leaders and founders, that wasn't even a secret. But I mean, now, of course, everyone's in denial that feminism ever had that as its goal or aim. But yeah, definitely, it's an interesting correlation to draw, and I think a very accurate one between you know, the lack of relationships and the, you know, retreating to things like video games and social media and all of that. I mean, it makes perfect sense. There's so many kids, and especially with the divorce rate being what it is, and so what is it, like 43% of kids live in single parent homes now? You know, something like almost half. And in some communities, like in the Black communities, it's like 77%
of children are born out of wedlock. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the father isn't there, but I can tell you, as someone who grew up, and I still live in neighborhoods in Chicago that have a majority black population in the neighborhoods I live in, there are almost no fathers. I mean, very, very few fathers to be found. You know, there are definitely males running around making children, and but there are no fathers around. There's
a difference. So, yeah. Wow. Yeah, and that's, I mean, we've seen all of the data on that, on the absolutely essential, crucial nature of fathers and father figures. I mean, and what it results in. You know, how the statistics just absolutely flip-flop, you know, based on whether or not you have a father in the home, and then, you know, crime rates and pregnancies and things like that. I mean, it's
it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy too, like, or at least a never-ending cycle, let's put it that way, where if you're a child in a family, it doesn't matter what your color is, but in the case with the overwhelming numbers being blacks, if you're a child in a family where there's no father in the home and the mother is, you know, she's not around because she's working part-time or what have you, and she is not able to, she's trying to do the job of two people.
Yeah.
And so she ends up there's a lot of beatings that go around, right? Well, in these single mothers are far more abusive to their kids than fathers are in general.
Yes.
And so she hits the kid to control his behavior, and then he grows up not understanding what it takes to be a good man, because there's no model for him to go after. And the media does a terrible job. I mean, it doesn't know, there's no way that it could even accomplish that job anyway, because there's nothing personal about it. It's very distanced from the child. And so he will grow up not having a good understanding of what healthy, I wouldn't even say male behavior, just healthy behavior might be.
Yeah.
And so he's going to become sexually active a bit sooner. Girls that are raised in those environments, they hit puberty earlier. They don't know how to pick good men because they don't have an example to go off of, so they just pick whatever men they find attractive. They make babies with those guys, and so the cycle continues. And it's almost like you just kickstart the engine with feminism, and then you just watch the motor run. And that's what's happened. I mean, that is absolutely what's happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. Family is the cornerstone, you know, foundation of society. There's no doubt. I mean, like you said, this issue of male-female relationships is not a peripheral one. It is absolutely central to the well-being of a nation. I mean, that's like you said, until we fix that. I mean, a lot of the other things are kind of like either symptoms of or symptoms of, you know, this other issue, or kind of irrelevant in light of it, or at least certainly less important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I got some super chats here. Zaranx gives us $5, and he has a question for you, Christy. He says, Christy, where would you encourage young women and girls to focus their energies to get them off the feminist path or off the feminist plantation?
Could you read the last part of that again? There was just a quick... Yeah. All
right, no problem. Where would you encourage young women and girls to focus their energies to get them off the feminist path?
One thing I would say is their relationship with their father. You know, if you have a father in the home, I think obviously this is a two-way street. You know, it's not something girls can do on their own. But I think that was very pivotal for me. I know if I hadn't had a very good relationship with my dad, or I didn't respect him, I think I would have been more, probably like any woman, more susceptible to feminist thought. Sure. Even if I weren't to call myself a feminist, I think that there are lots of women running around with feminist thought, and it's because they haven't had a good relationship with their dads, or, you know, they don't respect him, or
Absolutely. Actually, that reminds me, that was the thing I was trying to think of that fell from my mind. Yeah. So I want to get this out before it disappears again.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and Peterson is guilty of this as well himself, I've seen a lot of people that have tried to make the case against feminism by saying that feminism has been revealed to be unpopular with the majority of people, and also by extension the majority of women. So Peterson has said, if feminism is so great, then why is it only 20-something% of women consider themselves to be feminists? And while it can be a handy argument to make when you're trying to argue against the popularity of feminism, I think it's a little bit, it's a misnomer. I wouldn't say it's dishonest, but I would say it's incorrect, because just because someone doesn't call themselves a feminist doesn't mean that they don't agree with feminist ideology. And many of the pillars, or the central sort of the central foundation of what feminist is built on. For example, if you asked a common woman if she identifies as feminist and she says no, but if you asked her after that, do you think that women have disadvantages? Do you think that there should be more women in positions of power? Do you think there should be more female CEOs or women in Congress? Or do you think it's time for a female president? Or do you think that the patriarchy exists, or that men have always had the power? Do you believe in the wage gap? Do you believe that 1 in 5 women will be raped before she graduates college? A lot of them would agree with those ideas. They would agree that those things exist, even though they don't want to call themselves a feminist, right?
Yes, absolutely. I complete agreement there. That's one of my goals with my channel. It's one of my, what I have hoped anyway, for one of my audiences to be, is women who do not call themselves feminists, but have internalized a lot of feminist thought. And I believe that is the majority of women in America, at least. That's my personal opinion. I think that to one degree or another, that most women and girls think like feminists. I think the average woman thinks like a feminist, and that, yeah, like you said, all of those issues and how they view men, very much have been shaped by feminist thought. I mean, you can blame the mainstream media. You can blame, the fact that the boys and girls aren't being raised with a good view of the sexes. Like, boys and girls from the very beginning are being steeped in feminist thought, essentially, in feminist theory, without knowing it, whether we're talking about, in school, right, or in the family, or wherever else. And so, yeah, totally. I don't think it's an argument that I never make. Like, I think the fact that so few women call themselves feminists doesn't necessarily mean much if they think like feminists. In fact, in some ways, I see it as worse, because they're that much further from recognizing that they're kind of part of the problem, or that they, I mean, if you don't even recognize that you are a feminist or hold to feminist principles, you're not really going to be, if you're not aware, then where do we even begin to kind of discuss this whole topic? So, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I got another super chat. The Great Indoors 1979 gives us 10 euros and says, in a recent interview, Peter Hitchens said that while being a Trotskyist, his group was rooting for more immigration while never much caring about immigrants. They just wanted to attack the system. Yeah, I mean, that's what, to your point about cultural Marxism and the whole communist angle. I think, and why do feminists work with Islamists, for example? I think that's the one reason. It's mainly because they don't care about women; they care about winning, and they want to win whatever it takes. So if it means using anything to give them any bit of leverage, they will, even if it means working with people who probably would highly disagree with what they believe, right? It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yep, I was just thinking that. Yep, exactly. Absolutely. So that's it. And then Fredshinator 2 gives us $5 and says, yes, what you guys are doing will have more positive impact than the nebulous alt-right, which is becoming incoherent. Yeah, I don't even know what that means, really. So, I mean, what alt-right means. I think that's kind of all over the place. I don't even... Personally, It's just me. This is a whole other discussion for another time. I don't think they're right wing. I don't know why they even have that in their name. But that's just based on what, I guess, to be honest, what a layman on politics like myself has in so far as an understanding of what the left and the right represents. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my understanding is even less than that. I know it's thrown around a lot, but then sometimes I'm not sure, it's thrown around as an insult at people who aren't alt-right. But then it's also, it very accurately obviously does describe people on the other end of the spectrum. So, but I haven't looked into it enough to know.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. It gets flung around as this term that I don't know what it means because it's overused. I mean, we're called alt-right. People that watch us are called alt-right.
It's crazy.
It is. It's absolutely insane. So it's like, well, I don't know what that means. What I will tell you as far as the alt-right goes is they're very small. They don't have a lot of power. They're just like, and that's not to discredit them or say that there's no possible threat, but there isn't that much there. But they're very useful to the mainstream media when it comes to slandering people. Incel's another one. Did you notice that the MSM didn't even know what an incel was until Alec Manassian?
Yes,
and when he ran over those people, then even though there's still no evidence, still to this day, there's no evidence that Alec Manassian did that because he was an incel. I think it's got more to do with him having issues. But even though even though that's the case, now incel is just like red pill, MRA, MGTOW, PUA, alt-right, Gamergate. They're all just terms that get added together, and they're interchangeably used to slander people that disagree with you.
Absolutely, yes. Lots of conflating everything with everything, and that's what I mean with alt-right. I think it's just kind of thrown out there to mean not a liberal half the time. It's like, oh, if you oppose, leftist or liberal leanings, then you're alt-right. It's like, where is the nuance and the understanding here? I mean, it's the same with incel. Incel can't be used to describe everyone. But anyway, I digress.
No, it's fine. I got another super chat, and then there's something I want to respond to briefly. Cosmic D gives us €5 and says intersectionality equals the worst racist theory of the last decades. To teach young people their place in society is set because of their color and sex is mental. Well, yeah, absolutely. Intersectionality is the what do they call it? Intersectional feminism or fourth wave feminism, and their fight against the kyriarchy. I don't know if you heard about the kyriarchy, but that's essentially the kyriarchy is they were using it a couple of years ago. It's KYR, whatever, kyriarchy. You should look it up. But basically, the kyriarchy is the patriarchy, but it's intersectionalized. So it's broadened. Where the patriarchy was just male, the kyriarchy, the people at the top of the kyriarchy are the white, cis, hetero, well-off males. Yeah, I think there's probably more to it, but able-bodied, not overweight. So yeah, that's the kyriarchy.
The specimens, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The guys who get into the Navy SEALs.
Right. They are the kyriarchy.
Yes.
Oh, man.
But lastly, Black Knight Fool, who is one of the guys I made into a moderator, he disagreed with me on the alt-right, and he said I think that conversation should be left out of the MRM. I actually don't have an interest in talking about the alt-right. However, that label is thrown at us. So we kind of have to defend ourselves from it. I know that, the MSM is going to MSM, like the meteor is going to meteor. There's nothing you can do about that. But if you want to reach more people and try to get the word out, at some point we may have to address the alt-right insofar as how we are not like them and how they are actually not at all interested in what we want, and they're probably closer to another part of the problem. In fact, I bet that feminism will infect it and kill it. before it even picks up any ground, because that's what it does.
That's possible. Yeah, that is what feminism tends to do. Yeah, it's as absurd as saying that all anti-feminists are traditional conservatives. It's like, well, no, you don't even. I mean, I know, like, Women Against Feminism, for example. I'm in that group on Facebook. It's like over 10,000 people, and it's the entire political spectrum. I mean, the entire political spectrum and everything in between. The idea that, you know, you're alt-right because you're for men's rights or you oppose feminism, I don't even get it.
Yeah, no, I don't get it. Freshnator2 gives us another $2 and says white supremacy equals white people existing. No, white people. Get it right. The Great Indoors 1979 gives us €10 and says, I personally find the Nolan chart more useful than the political labels like left and right or liberal. I recently had somebody tell me that the UK sharp knife ban was an example of small c conservatism. Okay. Well, I don't know about that, but I personally... when it comes to labels like that, or I don't want to be that guy who's like, I don't like labels, man. But I just ask me, just ask me about an issue, and I'll tell you what my position is. Because I don't think I want to get into the whole here's where I sit on the fucking spectrum. I apologize for my language. Just to ask me what I feel about a certain issue, and I'll tell you what I think. And then on many things, I'll probably say, undecided for a number of reasons. We don't know enough, whatever. So Azerax gives us $5 and says, what is your opinion of conservative women espousing feminist ideas or ideals? He's asking you, I think.
Conservative women espousing feminist ideals.
Oh, they certainly do. They certainly do.
Interesting. Yes. Well, I think it goes to show feminists' reach, how much it's infected. Because there was a time when conservatism was incompatible with feminist thought and feminist ideology. But I mean, what do I think of them? I think it's an oxymoron to call yourself a conservative feminist. But maybe that's because I'm still using the old definition of conservatism. I know the whole political spectrum also has shifted, and it's really hard to. I mean, as far as I understand it anyway, feminists or conservatives who call themselves feminists typically take the popular understanding of the word feminist, meaning you're just pro human rights for women, which, again, I don't see how feminism is pro that. Especially, it does baffle me because especially for conservatives, feminism is not your friend. I mean, we've seen this over and over again. I mean, as much as feminists want women in power in, political office, for example, they're not pro-conservative women in political office. They're for typically left-leaning women in political office. So it's kind of baffling to me. I think maybe some of them just use the label to mean I'm for women's actual rights, but they don't really understand what feminism is, like a lot of people. And then some really are steeped in feminist thought, which is totally possible in conservative circles. Like I said. Yeah,
for sure.
The fact
they
that you
just might have a different idea on how to address the problems. Yeah. Perhaps. Good point.
Yes. Yeah, it's entirely possible to have, certain political leanings and yet have have a messed up view of the sexes and what women are entitled to. I mean, I
think that when I would like to add, this is just my opinion, when I see conservative pundits that talk about feminism as though they are for it, they are using the arguments that Christina0Misty has used in defense of feminism, where we may have needed it at this point in history, or we may need it in these other parts of the world, but not here. Or, and I've seen this a lot with Tommy Lauren, for example, they use it as like, they keep it in their back pocket to use as a gotcha on the people that they're opposing. So it's not even that they necessarily agree, but they find it to be a useful weapon against their political opponents. So she'll say, if Tommy Lauren, for example, is deplatformed or attacked or criticized or insulted by her political opponents, she'll pull the feminist card and say, oh, I thought you guys were feminists and I thought you cared about women, but you don't actually care about conservative women. You don't actually care about us. And it's not even that necessarily they agree with it, but they just find it, I think, to be kind of a useful weapon to the people that they're arguing against.
Yes, that's a good point too. I have noticed that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense. But
and I think that they don't really, it's like the problem I have with it is that they don't disagree with it on principle because they find it can be handy. And I think that that's probably true for, if you make an ideology and that the main crux of the ideology is to essentially prioritize women over men or women's needs over male needs, then it can be very difficult for anyone, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. If they are female, it can be very difficult for them to resist wanting it in some capacity, or at least like, I want to keep this around because I might need it. So I don't want to let it go. So yeah, I don't think that conservative women are necessarily anti-feminist, although I think that there's probably a way more conservative anti-feminists. However, a lot of times, and I know that the people in the chat are going to say this, so I'm going to go ahead and put it out there now. Conservative women may not be feminists per se, but they still believe instead that women should be prioritized and just protected, and they want chivalry, and they want the old sort of traditional system. They prefer that, and they think the feminist system takes away their protections because the feminist system claims to liberate women from that. And then there are women who say, well, I don't want that. I want a guy that's going to take care of me, and he's going to essentially put himself at risk for my well-being. I like that. And so there is also that, which is also, it's not that different from what feminism wants. It just feminism lies about it.
You're right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, feminism lies about it. That's the bottom line. And I mean, I see no problem. There's no problem, this is my opinion, with wanting that. I know a lot of people will attribute, a lot of people start talking about gynocentrism and hypergamy, on this topic, but I see no problem with the traditional view or the complementarian view of men and women. The problem comes in when women are demanding it of men, but they're not reciprocating. This is my view anyway. Which is in reality a lot of what we have. I mean, and that's where I think traditionalists can get a bad rep, and rightly so in certain circles, because in some senses it's not really any less feminist. It's just it's different demands that the woman has, but it's still feminist thought. It's still about control, and it's still about privilege.
Yeah.
And so, that's where, I mean, it's, again, labels are hard, I think, because then we have to define what we mean, and they're not the same for everyone. But I don't know. That's something I've seen in traditional circles.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I just got one more question, and because we've been going for a little over an hour and a half, and I don't want to make the show too long. But I do have one other super chat. Fretchnator2 gives us $2 and says, conservative equals protect women at all costs. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that could be like the short version of it. Let's see, okay, my last question. So what other now that you're back on YouTube, what other types of content do you plan on making? What are you looking at? What other facets of the culture war, if any, interest you? Also, I want to give you credit for using the term culture war before it was cool, because you said it in one of your first videos, like back in the day. So,
well, thanks. I think that came from my dad. I mean, he's one of my favorite people in the world. He and I always had these conversations about feminism and culture and politics long before I even got on YouTube. When I was growing up, he's a big conversationalist, and I love him. But yeah, I think I'd like to stick to making more content about feminism's history and origins, those kinds of things as I learn. Just sharing what I learn, and then also I've always thought it would be really great to eventually, you know, if my channel gets to be bigger, interview other anti-feminists and men's rights activists, and, you know, just to spread their voices and be a platform that does that. But
well, you don't have to wait till you're bigger to do that. I can probably get you some people if you just ask me. If you want to get somebody on your channel, like ask me, and I'll get you Karen. I'll get you Allison.
Seriously?
Get you... Absolutely.
That would be incredible. Yeah, that's like a dream of mine. Well, I think, yeah, I'm planning on probably going to take a couple months off at least in the near future after I have this baby, and just try to, you know, focus on family for a while. But definitely, I mean, I definitely have goals for the future too. So that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Keep me in mind. You have my email now. Just shoot me one when you're ready, and
awesome.
I can try and get you. I've had lots of previous guests. Many of them are anti-feminists and also a lot of MRAs, so I can get you any of those people.
Very
hopefully.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so yeah, I know people. I got the best people. They're so great. They're the greatest.
Excellent.
Believe me. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and take off, and we're gonna cancel, or we're gonna sign out. I want to thank you so much, Christy, for coming on, and welcome back to YouTube, and congratulations on the small squadron of Navy SEALs that you're hopefully going to be pumping out. And they will reach the top of the dominance hierarchy. I want to thank you guys for watching us. I got some more super chats as we're closing out, so I got to read them. Zeranx gives us $5 and says, "Congrats on the new tyke, Christy. Glad to have you back." And,
thank you so much.
Yep. And Polaris589 gives us $5 and says, "Tell me who you want, and I can get them for you." The Doge Father. Yeah, that's right. Thanks again for coming on today's show, and you guys have a great afternoon. You too, Christy, and you have a good one. We'll see you guys very soon on Honey Badger Radio. Goodbye.